This pre-release task is from the UK or Europe area for 2018. So this is quite a recent one, and it says obviously in preparation for the exam we've got to do 3 tasks, always 3 tasks. A computer shop will build a computer from components to meet a customer's requirements. For each request for a computer to be built, an estimate of the cost is produced. The component stock level is checked. If all of the components are in stock, a firm order to build the computer can be placed. A program is required to work out the cost of the computer, update the stock levels, and provide a daily summary of orders for the shop owner. Write and test a program for the shop owner. So task 1, it looks a bit scarily complicated, but it's really not. It says produce an estimate, and basically we need to let the customer choose a processor, some RAM, some storage, a screen, and a case and USB ports. Pick one of those choices, put together your computer and work out the cost. So for example, if we picked a P3 processor, then the price would be £100 or $100, sorry. If they picked 16 gigabytes of RAM, then it would be $75. If they picked 2 terabytes of storage, then it would be $100. The screen, if it was 23-inch, it would be $120, and the case, MIDI tower, would be $70, etc., and USB $20. So there's going to be quite a lot of code in this task, mainly just because we've got all those different components. But if you try not to worry about all of those components, what we can actually do is break this down so that what we have is, if we just work on the fact that we've got a processor and work on doing the processor first, and then we can add the other components afterwards, because all of the components are going to be doing the same thing. It doesn't matter that we've got all these different things. The way that we build together our computer is just going to be repeating code for the RAM, for the storage, for the screen, for the case, and in the USB ports. So to start off, as I code this, I'm going to just be using the processor and then add in the other bits later on. And I will do that, so you do that too. Okay, so the first thing we do is we let the customer choose a component, we produce the estimate and work out the price, and then we need to add on 20%, which is, here, funnily enough, here in the UK, the tax, the amount of VAT we have to pay on items. So let's look at what this would look like in a flow chart. And here's one I did earlier. So here's a basic flow chart that I did earlier. Obviously we just start, we input the processor, the RAM, the storage, the screen, the case, the USB, we get the price for each component, we calculate the price, we get the unique estimate number, and we calculate the price, add on 20%, and then output the price and the estimate number. So for task 1, actually, if we take away the fact that we've got to do different things for the processor, RAM, storage, like I said, if we just do it for one component, it's actually very, very easy. So let's do that first. So the main thing to consider for this task is how we're going to store the data for the prices. And there's 2 ways we can do this. The first way is to use variables to store the prices for each processor or RAM, etc. Or we could use arrays. Now I'm going to use variables for this way, but if you choose to do yours, if you want to do it, you can use arrays to do it. So what I'm going to do is, in my Python code, I'm going to create a variable to store the processor. The first processor is the P3, so I'm going to call it processor P3, and the price for that is $100. So I'm going to put 100. Then we've got processor P5, and that is 120. Then we've got processor P7, and that is 200, I think. Yeah. Okay, so we could do the same for the RAM, the storage, and the screens. Actually, I might do it for 2. I'll do it for the RAM as well. I said I was going to just do 1, but we'll do it for the RAM as well. So we'll say RAM 16, and that is 75, and RAM 32 is 150, and we'll fill in the other components later, because otherwise we're just going to get so many different lines of code. Okay, so we need to let the user pick a processor, their RAM, and eventually the storage, the screen, etc. So first of all, we need to create a variable to store that. And I'm just going to, before I do that, I'm just going to put a little label up here and say this is going to be the prices of components. And so down here, I'm going to say user picks here. And so they need to pick a processor. So I'm going to call it customer processor. And we're going to get them to enter which one they want. And it's going to be an input. Please enter the processor you would like. And it will be a P3 at 100, a P5 at 120, or a P7 at, just move this slightly, there we go, or a P7 at 200. So they're going to enter that, and then we can say if the customer processor picked is equal to P3, then the price that they're going to have is going to be $100. Okay, so we need a variable to store what everything costs and what everything is going to be for the computer. So we've got to this situation where how do we do that? Well, we do need a running total, but actually probably one of the best things to do is to store this data in an array. Now you could do it, although we might do that in an order later. Actually, no, I think that's what we'll do is we'll have a price item, total price, and we'll set that to be 0, and then we'll add on to that the total price equals the total price plus 100. Okay. So elif the customer processor is equal to P5, then the total price is going to be the total price plus 120. And actually, you might have noticed I've done this slightly incorrectly. What I've done is I've added hard-coded values on there. What I could do is just use processor P3 or processor P5, etc. So yeah, I think that's a good way to do it actually. We'll do that. We'll do processor P5 because then that way you just have to change the value at the top. Okay, so then we've got elif the customer processor equals P7, then the total price is the total price plus P7. And I'm just going to get that in the right place. There we go. Great, so that's our processor picked. Then we need to let them select our RAM. So I'll do the RAM, but obviously we're going to have to do this for all the components, so it could get a bit tiresome. So I'll add that in later and get you to add it in later as well. So this time we're adding the RAM. There's only 2 for RAM, the 16 gig or 32, 75 or not. So let's just add that in, just get this up there. Please enter the RAM you would like, and we've got only 2 for that. Oh, I think I'm going to have an error up here because I've missed off. Yeah, I have. If we just have a look at this here, I've missed off a quote there. So right at the top there, I need to put one in there like that. So do correct that, otherwise you'll get an error when we try and run this. So let's pick the RAM, and the RAM is going to be 16, which is going to be 75, or 32 gig, which is going to be, I think it was 100, wasn't it? I keep forgetting. 150. I thought that was cheap. There we go. Okay, so we only need 2 elifs here because we've only got 2 choices. So if they pick 16, then it's going to, the total price is going to be the total price plus RAM 16. And the total price, if they pick 32, is going to be plus RAM 32. Okay, so just imagine that we've got that, and then obviously to do, I'm going to put to do, add other components. Now, one thing actually I'm going to do, which I forgot to do as well, is I've just forgot to change this variable here. So we're just changing customer processor. We need to change that to customer RAM. If we don't change that, then we'll lose what they've picked later on. So do change that as well. Make sure your code's exactly like mine, and we'll continue on. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we need to get a unique estimate number. So in order to get a unique estimate number for each order, we need to hold that in a variable. So we're going to call it estimate number, and we'll start off with the number 1, and we'll just increment that. Every time they do an order, it will just go up by 1. So we can say our estimate number equals, oh, actually we're going to use that. So we'll just print that out, the estimate number, which we're going to use to identify our order. And obviously it's just going to start off at 1. And also what we need to do is, it said in here, it said the customer makes a choice from each component. The estimate must show a unique estimate number, the components chosen, so we need to print that out, and the price of each component. So if we're going to print out each component they've picked, what we could do is, well, we'll just print out those variables here, customer processor, customer RAM. So we'll do that. We'll do print processor chosen, and that is customer proc, and we're going to print the RAM, and the RAM is going to be the customer RAM, like that. And obviously we'll put the other components in once we've got the main algorithm out of the way. So we've now printed out the estimate number, we've printed out the components they've chosen. We need to print out the total cost. So that's quite easy. Obviously we can just do the total cost, that's capital P, whoops. Total cost is total cost, or total price, sorry, total price. Okay, so let's just check this. It says the estimate must also show the total cost of the computer, which we've done, and which is calculated as the sum of the cost of the components plus 20%. So actually what we need to do is add that on. So we'll do times 1.0, and that will add 20% on. There's a number of different ways you can add 20% on. That's probably the easiest way. Okay, and actually what I might do is I might save that in a variable. I might do that separately. Total price plus tax is equal to the total price times 1.2. Great, okay, so I think that's everything. Let's test this now. I haven't tested any of this yet, which is not very good really. You should probably test things a bit more sooner than I've done, but let's test it now. So we enter the processor we want, I'll have P3, and we enter the RAM, I'll have 16. So it says processor P3, RAM 16, that's good, it's printing everything out. The total cost is 210, so that should be £100 plus 75, is that right? It's P3 and 16. Yeah, that's correct. Good. Okay, so we have done everything for task 1. I think, let's just double check. Yeah, so we've done everything for task 1, but we now need to add the other components on. So this is going to be a bit mind-numbingly boring, but let's do it anyway. So we've got to add in storage next. So it's 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes. So storage 1 equals 50. Storage 2 equals 100. We could put TB afterwards actually. I'll put TB, then we know, like that. Then what have we got? We've got screen 19 or 23, screen 19 and screen 23, and they are 65 and 120. That's quite cheap for screens, isn't it? And then we've got our case, mini or MIDI, case mini and case MIDI. I'm using capitals here. I don't know why I've switched actually, but you can use lowercase if you want. So that's 40 and 70. And last one, USB 2 or 4. USB 2. I'm not quite sure who want just 2 USBs. That's actually very low. USB 4. Sorry, that one is. We've got 10 or 20. 10 or 20. Okay, so now we need to just add in our if statements down here as well. So what all we have to do, and our inputs, is I'll just copy this and replace them all. So we've got 2 choices for each of these other components. So the first one is the storage, customer storage. Input the storage you would like, and it's going to be 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes, and the prices were 50 or 100. 50 or 100. So if they pick one TB, then the total price is going to be the total price plus storage 1 TB. If they pick 2 TB, then it's going to be plus storage 2 TB. Okay, good. And we can also print that out here. So obviously we need to print out the order. So we'll say storage and comma cust storage. It's lowercase, that one. Then we need to do the screen. So the customer screen is we had what did we have? We had 19 or 23, and they were 65 or 120. And again, we just need to change all our variables. And change this so it is the screen 19. I think that's what the variables were called. Yeah, screen 19, screen 23. Good. And then print that out as well. Okay, and 2 more to do, our case and our USB ports. So the customer case is going to be MIDI or mini. Please enter the case you would like, mini or MIDI, and they were 40 or 70. oh, sorry, case mini. Sorry, I've done that wrong. I'm still on the screen. There we go. And we'll print that out as well. Print case, customer case. Okay, last one then, our USB ports. I can't remember what we called it, USB 2, USB 4. So last one, and then as you can see, it's a bit complicated. It's not really that complicated, it's just a lot of code. I think that's the thing. So the customer USB is going to be, please enter the case you would like. So it would be, please enter the USBs you would like, and it would be 2 or 4. So that is 10 or 20. Nice and cheap those, aren't they? 10 or 20. I think you'd probably go for 4, wouldn't you, really? Okay, so we've got 2, we've got 4. If the customer screen is mini, so that's wrong, we need to change the USB. Customer USB is 2, then it's going to be USB 2. And if they pick USB 4, USB 4. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. Let's just run this just in case I've misspelled anything, and then that will be this over with. So or this task anyway. So I've got I've got an error here, and it said EOL while scanning while scanning. I'll try it again. EOL while scanning string literal. So that means if you get that error, you've left off a quote somewhere, and here you can see I've left it off there, missing a quote. So let's, I've added that in, and we'll run again. Okay, so enter the processor, we'll have a P7. Enter the RAM, we'll have a 32. Push the boat out here. 2 TB, 23 screen, a mini case, and 4 USBs. So that has printed it out. If I just move that up, you can see that. Good. So it's picked out what we've got. Oh, I've forgotten to print out the USBs. So let's add that in, and then that will be done. So that's the last thing I forgot to do. I've not printed the screen as well. So let's do the screen, and we'll print the screen, customer screen, and print USBs. Customer USB. Great, so that's task 1 all done. So I've just realised that some of this code for entering the data is slightly incorrect further down. So just take a slow look at what I've changed here. Just check that each of the elifs, it says that the customer processor, elif the customer processor, elif the customer RAM. If it's the storage, it says customer storage. If it's the screen, then it's a customer screen. And if it's the case, then it's the customer case and the customer USB, because I think I've left some code in there that was incorrect. It will still run, but it won't run as it should do. So just watch out for that and make sure you've changed everything. I'll just scroll up the code again just so you can check that you've got everything as I've got, and you should be fine.